The Lord is my shepherd. The shepherd walks out to tend to his sheep. They bleat with joy and crowd the gate as he enters in. They're excited at what he might be bringing them. I shall not want. If they could, they would take the wool off their own backs and lay it down to make a grand entrance for him. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. They see the sack he carries over his shoulder. He leadeth me beside the still waters. They want to know what's in it. They want to feast on what he has to offer. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. They had been fed by others before, but it was not a food that lasted. It didn't satisfy their bellies. Nor was it a noble shepherd that helped them before, but a mere hireling. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. When he saw the wolves coming, he ran away like a coward. He let the wolves come into the pen, devouring some sheep and scattering the rest. He was only tending the sheep for a wage. He cared nothing for their well-being. He didn't care what they ate. But there was something different about this new man. He was a true shepherd, a noble shepherd, a beautiful one. He was good, for thou art with me. If it came to it, he would lay down his life for these sheep, and he spoke to them as though they were his children. And the food that he was bringing to them, what is it? It was the most heavenly of mixes, perfectly blended to give the sheep the vitamins that would make their wool thick and luscious. This food provided them with protein to build their muscles, as every lamb is eventually destined to be slaughtered. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Yes, this food made them beautiful in life, and prepared them for a noble death. The shepherd finished his procession to the trough. He opened his sack and began to pour it in. The sheep, even more joyful now, began to dance around the table on which this heavenly food was being presented. In unison sung praise to the one who brought them this gift. And they opened their mouths and received what the shepherd had to offer. So many of the sheep began to eat more rapidly. Their bellies were satisfied, but they wanted more. My cup runneth over. But there were others who despised this food. They knew it was good for them, but they would rather the simple, easy-to-digest food of the previous shepherds. They cared nothing about beauty in this life, and they didn't want to think about their own death. They wandered from the trough and returned to the mud-stained grass elsewhere in the pasture. The good shepherd called to them, but they ignored his voice. He even used his crook to try to drag them back to the place where they could feast on the food that would preserve them into eternity. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. But they shook it off and continued eating food that would perish. The shepherd shook the dust from his feet and returned to those who ate the food he offered with joy. They heard his voice, and they knew it. When he would speak, they would all cry out in harmony with one another, but only briefly before they returned to their feast. Thou anointest my head with oil. The shepherd smiled, patted some of the sheep on the head, and made his way back to the gate. There was still food to be given. The sack was not emptied. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. The shepherd had other sheep in mind, others that needed the same food that would preserve them in life and prepare them for death. One lamb, who was loved by the good shepherd, looked up from his eating. He could see other pens, filled with sheep that looked different than he did. Sheep that danced differently than he and his brothers did. They had different types of wool. And this lamb could see that the sheep of these other pens heard the same voice of the Good Shepherd. And though they sounded different than he did, they all cried out for the same shepherd when they heard him speak, and they longed for the same heavenly food. The fences would eventually be torn down. All would be brought together. There would be one shepherd, one flock. I will dwell in the house of the Lord